History holds a shadowy secret. It isn't solely shaped by brilliant minds. It's often derailed by astonishing foolishness. We're about to recount the tale of the bank robber who relied on lemon juice for invisibility, the politician who believed an island could capsize, and the president who tragically succumbed to his own ego after delivering a speech. These are not mere slip-ups. These are 33 iconic blunders that demonstrate just how scarce common sense truly is. Let's commence the countdown. 1. First up is MacArthur Wheeler, a man whose criminal intellect was, to put it mildly, severely flawed. In 1995, Wheeler made the decision to rob 2 banks in broad daylight. His ingenious plan for becoming invisible lemon juice. You see, he understood that lemon juice could serve as invisible ink. So he illogically deduced that slathering it all over his face would make him unseen by security cameras. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Armed with this seemingly foolproof theory, he entered the banks, beamed at the cameras, and walked out with the loot. He was apprehended later that very evening when the police aired the crystal-clear surveillance footage on the news. His astonishment upon viewing the tapes was genuine. "But I wore the juice," he stammered, showcasing that confidence cannot replace fundamental chemistry. 2. Next on our list is an individual who illustrates that it's possible to stumble your way to success: Lord Timothy Dexter. This quirky businessman from the 18th century had the Midas touch in reverse. Every ludicrous idea he had somehow turned into gold. His competitors attempted to sabotage him by convincing him to ship a load of bedwarmers to the sweltering West Indies. A foolish move, correct? Wrong. They arrived and were swiftly acquired by the local sugar industry, who utilized them as ideal ladles for molasses. On another occasion, he sent shiploads of coal to Newcastle, renowned for its coal mining. A catastrophe waiting to happen. Except coincidentally, a massive miners' strike had just crippled the city, and he sold his coal at a staggering profit. He was the living embodiment of a cosmic joke, a walking contradiction who accidentally became a millionaire. 3. Introducing Mad Mike Hughes, a man whose belief system was as flat as his assertion that the Earth was too. Hughes was a limo driver, and daredevil, utterly convinced that NASA and the scientific community were deceiving the public. To demonstrate his point, he opted to undertake what any rational flat-earther would: construct a homemade steam-powered rocket in his backyard to propel himself high enough to see the frisbee shape of our world with his own eyes. After multiple failed tries and near catastrophes in February 2020, Hughes launched his rocket one final time. Tragically, but perhaps predictably, the rocket malfunctioned moments after liftoff, and he fell to his death. He died fighting for his cause, a cause based on dismissing centuries of scientific evidence, rendering him a martyr for monumental ignorance. 4. We expect a certain caliber of intellect from our elected officials. Congressman Hank Johnson, however, chose to challenge that expectation in 2010. During a House Armed Services Committee session regarding a planned military presence increase on the island of Guam, Johnson expressed a grave concern to a senior admiral. His worries didn't encompass logistics or environmental impact. No, his fears were much more profound. He was anxious that adding 8,000 Marines and their families to the island might result in such an overwhelming population that it could capsize and flip over. Yes, he was dead serious. He feared a floating island. The admiral, bless his heart, managed to maintain a straight face and assured the congressman that Guam was firmly anchored to the ocean floor and faced no risk of overturning. 5. In the realm of professional sports, there exists a fine line between fame and infamy. In 1964, Minnesota Vikings defensive end Jim Marshall didn't merely cross that line. He bolted 64 yards past it in the wrong direction. During a matchup against the San Francisco 49ers, Marshall recovered a fumble. In a rush of pure adrenaline and confused glory, he sprinted towards the end zone, aiming for the touchdown of his dreams. The crowd was roaring, his adversaries appeared bewildered, and for a brief moment Marshall was a hero. The catch. He was running towards his own end zone. He exuberantly tossed the ball into the sky, inadvertently scoring a safety for the opposing team. This incident stands as arguably the most magnificent, comical, and utterly foolish blunder in the chronicles of sports. Winning the Boston Marathon represents a monumental achievement of legendary endurance, necessitating numerous months of grueling training and extraordinary determination. Alternatively, one might opt for the approach taken by Rosie Ruiz. In 1980, Ruiz was proclaimed the female victor of the esteemed event, crossing the finish in a record-breaking time. However, observers and fellow competitors noted something was amiss. She appeared hardly perspiring and didn't seem visibly fatigued. Her interviews following the race revealed her astonishing ignorance about running. The truth came to light swiftly. Ruiz had only run the final mile. For the preceding 25 miles she had ridden the Boston subway, exiting the crowd close to the finish line to sprint to her unearned triumph. She was stripped of her title, turning into a symbol of audacious, lazy, and absurd cheating. Next, let's discuss William Henry Harrison, the 9th President of the United States, whose entire term in office serves as a darkly humorous cautionary tale regarding pride. In March 1841, the 68-year-old Harrison sought to demonstrate he was tough as nails rather than some frail old man. Hence, on the frigid and damp morning of his inauguration day, he adamantly refused to wear a coat, hat, or gloves. He then proceeded to deliver the longest inaugural address in American history, lasting nearly 2 hours in the pouring rain. The speech was intended to convey strength. Instead, it resulted in a severe case of pneumonia. He passed away exactly 1 month later, earning the distinction of the shortest presidency ever recorded. He indeed proved his toughness, although not quite enough to survive the consequences of his own hubris. Evel Knievel was a legendary figure, a man who flirted with death on his motorcycle as a profession. However, his most ambitious stunt resulted in his greatest embarrassment. In 1974, he aimed to leap across the vast Snake River Canyon in Idaho. A typical motorcycle wouldn't suffice. Hence, he commissioned a steam-powered rocket known as the SkyCycle X2. The anticipation was immense. The world was watching in eager expectation. As the countdown ended, the SkyCycle roared to life and ascended the ramp. But in a moment of sheer comedic catastrophe, the parachute intended for a safe landing deployed prematurely on the launch ramp. Instead of soaring triumphantly across the canyon in a glorious display, the rocket pitifully tipped over the edge slowly and disgracefully descending to the canyon floor below. It was less a daring stunt and more like a tragic science fair project gone terribly awry. Now, envision yourself as an inventor who has developed something so groundbreaking it could revolutionize cities and human lifestyles. This was Dean Kamen, the mastermind behind the Segway. He promoted his secret project codenamed Ginger with such fervor that industry giants like Steve Jobs predicted it would eclipse the personal computer. The world held its breath expecting flying cars or personal jetpacks. Instead, what they received was a self-balancing two-wheeled scooter, essentially a glorified kickboard aimed at mall cops and tourists who find walking too taxing. The Segway became a perpetual joke representing the epitome of exaggerated expectations. The ultimate tragicomic conclusion arrived years later when the owner of the Segway company, Jimmy Heselden, met an unfortunate end after accidentally riding his own Segway off a cliff. It is impossible to conceive of a more perfectly ironic finale. If one intends to attempt an assassination of a president, it would likely be prudent not to choose Andrew Jackson, a man already renowned as a legendary tough guy long before he even entered the White House. However, Richard Lawrence decided to test his luck in 1835. He approached Jackson and fired his pistol at point-blank range. Click. A misfire. Undeterred, Lawrence drew a second pistol and fired again. Click. Another misfire. The likelihood of two separate pistols misfiring consecutively was later calculated to be 1 in 125,000. Yet Jackson did not wait for a third attempt. The furious 67-year-old president charged at Lawrence and began to administer a thorough beating with his walking cane until he was pulled away by others. Lawrence didn't succeed in making history, but he certainly received a history lesson courtesy of the president's cane. Let us now venture to 1962. A youthful, dynamic four-piece band hailing from Liverpool entered Decca Records ready to seize their moment with a career-launching audition. They poured their souls into their performance. Following the meeting, the executives gathered closely to make a decision that would forever resonate through the corridors of corporate foolishness. They declined. They turned down the band with one executive notoriously stating, "Rock groups are fading fast." That band, of course, was the Beatles. While Decca Records inked a deal with another group that day, who soon faded into obscurity, the Beatles found their home with EMI, ultimately becoming the largest band in the history of the globe and revolutionizing music for all time. Decca's choice wasn't merely an error. It was akin to gazing at the wheel's invention and declaring, "Nah, we prefer dragging our belongings." Some individuals pursue fame through talent, innovation, or courage. Then there's Plenty L. Wingo, a man who chose to make his mark on history by walking in reverse. In 1931, this Texan embarked on a mission of remarkable absurdity to stroll from Santa Monica, California to Istanbul, Turkey, all while walking backward. He even crafted a pair of glasses featuring rear-view mirrors to navigate his path. For 18 arduous months, he ambulated in reverse across continents, becoming a minor celebrity for his utterly peculiar endeavor. He finally achieved his goal, arriving in Istanbul 1.5 years later. He etched his name in the record books, but also raised a significant philosophical query. If you dedicate so much time and effort to accomplish something profoundly pointless, can it truly be considered an achievement? Throughout the 1950s, America was engulfed in a moral frenzy, and its unlikely antagonist was the comic book. The man stirring the pot was psychiatrist Frederick Varham. In his tome, Seduction of the Innocent, he offered his so-called expert analysis, which was frankly absurd. Varham asserted that Superman symbolized fascism. Wonder Woman's prowess rendered her a corrupting lesbian, and the dynamic pairing of Batman and Robin was merely a homosexual fantasy. He contended that these colorful comic pages were a direct contributor to juvenile delinquency. His pseudo-scientific drivel was taken so seriously that it prompted Senate hearings and the establishment of the Comics Code Authority, a censorship entity that neutered the industry for decades. One man's outlandish, paranoid ruminations nearly obliterated an entire American art form. Donald Sterling, the longtime billionaire proprietor of the LA Clippers basketball team, was a man known for his eccentricity and thriftiness. Yet his true foolishness was exposed not on the court but through a recorded conversation. In 2014, the world was privy to a discussion between Sterling and his mistress, where he launched into a disgusting racist diatribe, scolding her for publicly associating with black individuals, including the legendary Magic Johnson. In the era of smartphones, engaging in such a dialogue is like playing Russian roulette with your entire professional life. The tape was leaked, the public uproar was overwhelming, and the NBA, a league largely made up of black athletes, had no other option. They banned him for life and compelled him to sell the team, erasing his legacy with a singularly foolish, self-inflicted blow. Every politician yearns to be recognized for addressing significant issues. For Congressman James Riley, in the 1990s, that major issue was exploding toilets. Yes, you heard that correctly. Riley became obsessed with what he claimed was a rampant and perilous situation involving toilets exploding aboard U.S. Navy ships. He fervently demanded that millions of taxpayer dollars be allocated to investigate and resolve this porcelain crisis. The primary issue, the Navy itself seemed largely unaware of this widespread epidemic. While his colleagues debated matters of national security and economic stability, Riley was waging a lonely battle against ceramic projectiles in naval restrooms. He became a national laughingstock, a perfect embodiment of a politician desperately hunting for a problem to solve, even if it meant fabricating one. The year was 1988, and Senator Gary Hart was the charismatic, good-looking frontrunner for the Democratic presidential nomination. His campaign, however, was plagued by rumors of infidelity. When faced by the press, Hart exhibited such arrogance that it should be studied by political scientists for generations. He challenged the media, "Follow me around, I don't care. They'll just find it boring." It was a direct provocation, a challenge to the entire journalistic community. The Miami Herald quickly took him up on his dare. They set up watch at his townhouse in Washington, and within mere days spotted him in the company of a young model named Donna Rice. This scandalous story, complete with a photograph of Rice perched on Hart's lap on a yacht fittingly named Monkey Business, obliterated his campaign in a matter of hours. He essentially orchestrated the media's own execution of him. The name Kellogg immediately brings to mind breakfast cereal, yet hidden behind those familiar flakes is a rather strange narrative thanks to Dr. John Harvey Kellogg. He was not merely a proponent of health, he was the eccentric mind behind wellness. At his renowned Battle Creek Sanitarium, affluent individuals flocked to him seeking cures. His tactics were utterly outrageous. He was convinced that most health issues, particularly the sin of sexual desire, were rooted in poor dietary choices. His prescribed remedy consisted of a bland, meat-free diet, which gave rise to the creation of cornflakes and infamously yogurt enemas. He advocated for the near-constant cleansing of the colon, using copious amounts of yogurt, sometimes even utilizing a device that could inject 15 quarts within a minute. He was a trailblazer in the wellness sector, and also a pioneer in charging wealthy individuals for the peculiar privilege of having yogurt inserted rectally. Jerry Falwell Jr., served as the president of Liberty University, one of the largest institutions of evangelical Christian education globally, and a powerful influence in conservative political discourse. His persona was built on advocating family values and adhering to a strict moral compass. However, that image came crashing down dramatically in the year 2020. Initially, a photograph emerged of him aboard a yacht, drink in hand, pants unfastened, with his arm draped around a woman who was not his spouse. This was an odd sight for a figure of religious authority, but it was merely the prelude. The main event was a shocking scandal involving a multi-year affair his wife allegedly embarked on with a young pool attendant from Miami. An arrangement Falwell Jr. was not only aware of but, as per the pool attendant's accounts, found pleasure in witnessing. The level of hypocrisy was utterly overwhelming, leading to an absolute career collapse. In the high-stakes arena of politics, a single foolish statement can derail a career. Take Todd Akin, for instance, a congressman vying for a Senate seat in the year 2012. During an interview when pressed to elaborate on his stringent anti-abortion views, particularly in cases of rape, Akin, in an attempt to sound knowledgeable, delivered a line filled with such astounding biological naivety that it instantly became iconic. He asserted that in cases of what he termed legitimate rape, the female body has mechanisms that attempt to shut down the process to prevent pregnancy. The backlash was swift and merciless. The notion of legitimate rape was offensive, and the idea of the body shutting that whole thing down was ridiculed by anyone who had merely passed a middle school health class. His campaign crumbled instantaneously, all due to one moment of remarkable foolishness. Greed can lead individuals to undertake incredibly foolish actions, and the Hunt brothers from Texas exemplify this perfectly. In 1979, Nelson and William Hunt, heirs to a vast oil empire, determined that their wealth was insufficient. Thus, they devised a basic yet profoundly foolish scheme to monopolize the global silver market. They believed they could amass so much physical silver and so many futures contracts that they would essentially dictate the worldwide price and ascend to silver royalty. For a brief period, it worked. The price of silver soared, but they neglected one critical aspect. Markets and regulators have the capacity to retaliate. The Federal Commodity Regulators and the New York Mercantile Exchange altered the rules, effectively calling their bluff. The silver bubble burst, the value plummeted, and the Hunt brothers suffered losses exceeding $1 billion, nearly triggering a global financial crisis in the process. When Albert Einstein passed away in 1955, the world grieved the loss of a brilliant intellect. Pathologist Thomas Harvey, who conducted the autopsy, took that sentiment perhaps a bit too literally. Without obtaining consent from Einstein's family, Harvey took his brain. He believed he could unveil the secrets of genius by examining it. For the subsequent 4 decades, Harvey kept one of the most celebrated brains in history, suspended in a jar of formaldehyde in his basement. He would relocate across the country, transporting the brain like an unusual sloshing pet. Occasionally, he would slice off a piece and send it to inquisitive researchers. However, despite his morbid fascination, Harvey was not an elite neuroscientist. He did not make any groundbreaking discoveries. Harvey was not regarded as a leading neuroscientist. He did not contribute any revolutionary findings. He was merely an individual who perpetrated a serious crime and subsequently spent the remainder of his existence as the somewhat unsettling keeper of a stolen brain. Alex Jones created a sprawling enterprise rooted in conspiracy theories. However, his unwavering onslaught against the families affected by the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting exposed a level of cruel stupidity that is truly difficult to fathom. For numerous years, following the 2012 tragedy in which 20 children and 6 adults lost their lives, Jones utilized his InfoWars platform to propagate the falsehood that the shooting was a governmental ruse and that the sorrowful parents were merely crisis actors. His supporters, incited by his rants, harassed, menaced, and tormented these families for an entire decade. Ultimately, the parents filed a defamation lawsuit against him. In court, Jones's fabrications unraveled. The outcome: juries mandated him to compensate the families almost $1.5 billion. He learned the hard way that freedom of speech does not shield one from the repercussions of being a malicious, destructive fool. Most individuals, when attempting to impress an ex, might opt for a new hairstyle or share a flattering picture on social media. Robert Driscoll was far from ordinary. In 1976, this disgruntled truck driver chose a far more grandiose expression. He made off with a Boeing 707 cargo jet from an airport in Angola where he was employed. Despite having only minimal flight training, he successfully got the enormous aircraft airborne and circled for several hours. His apparent goal was to demonstrate to his ex-wife back home what he was truly capable of. The international incident he ignited prompted frantic communications between Africa and the United States. Ultimately, he landed the plane only to face arrest. There is no record of whether his ex was impressed. However, it is safe to conclude that this was likely not the grand romantic gesture he had envisioned. Through the annals of history, there have been charismatic leaders who persuaded their followers to believe in some truly strange concepts. But few were as fundamentally and cosmically misguided as Cyrus Teed. In the late 19th century, Teed, a former physician, experienced a divine vision. The revelation: humanity does not inhabit the exterior of a spinning globe. No, we all reside within a hollow earth with the sun, moon, and stars contained within this colossal concave sphere. He dubbed his theory and was able to attract several thousand followers to a commune in Florida, living by his inside-out principles. They performed experiments to validate their theory, which inevitably failed. However, Teed was a master at rationalizing away facts. He was a con artist of cosmic dimensions who persuaded people to dismiss all of science and reasoning in favor of his beautifully absurd universe. Elias Jackson. Lucky Baldwin embodied the carefree spirit of 19th century California, amassing and squandering fortunes with reckless abandon. His nickname? Lucky was largely sarcastic, as his life was characterized by a series of spectacular gambles, many of which backfired comically. The crowning folly of his life took place in 1888. He had just completed the construction of the most lavish hotel in San Francisco, the Baldwin Hotel, a true marvel of luxury. On the very night before its grand opening, Baldwin, known for his miserly tendencies when it came to practical matters, opted not to purchase fire insurance for the building, deeming it an unnecessary expenditure. You can probably guess the outcome. A fire erupted, and the entire magnificent structure was reduced to ashes in a matter of hours. A complete and utter loss. He literally watched his uninsured fortune vanish into smoke. Mike Tyson was among the most ferocious and skilled boxers to ever enter the ring. However, his financial acumen was as sharp as a marshmallow. After earning over $300 million throughout his career, he ultimately managed to squander it all, in a blaze of foolish extravagance that is almost as legendary as his left hook. The infamous biting of Evander Holyfield's ear was a moment of madness. Nevertheless, his spending patterns represented a long-term spiral into financial insanity. He purchased fleets of luxury cars that he never actually drove, mansions in which he barely resided, and even a $2 million solid gold bathtub for his first wife. His most notorious acquisition, 3 Royal Bengal tigers, came at a tremendous cost to acquire and an even greater expense to care for. Unsurprisingly, this lifestyle inevitably led him straight to bankruptcy, demonstrating that one can be a titan in the ring, yet a complete fool with a checkbook. James Gordon Bennett Jr. was the eccentric and incredibly affluent proprietor of the New York Herald. He was a man capable of obtaining anything he desired. James Gordon Bennett Jr. was the quirky and opulently rich proprietor of the New York Herald. He was a gentleman who had the means to obtain whatever his heart desired, except it turned out to be merely a fragment of self-discipline. In the year 1877, he became engaged to an enchanting socialite, Caroline May. On the day of New Year's, Bennett found himself at a gathering hosted at his future in-law's grand estate, where he proceeded to indulge excessively in alcoholic beverages. In search of a restroom and finding all lavatories occupied, he made a choice that would instantly obliterate his social reputation. He approached the magnificent fireplace in the main salon and relieved himself into it right before the aghast guests. Some tales suggest it was a grand piano instead. Regardless, the engagement was immediately terminated, and Caroline's brother later issued him a challenge for a duel. Bennett's legacy was forever sealed, not as a newspaper tycoon, but as the individual who confused a high society gathering for a urinal. 38. General George B. McClellan was a contradiction wrapped in an elegant uniform. He was, by all assessments, a genius in the organization and training of a military force. The Union's army under his command evolved into a remarkable, well-drilled combat unit. Yet there was one minuscule issue. McClellan was paralyzed by the fear of actually deploying it. In what became a significant source of frustration for President Abraham Lincoln, McClellan routinely and grossly overestimated the size of the Confederate troops he confronted, sometimes believing their ranks to be 2 or 3 times greater than reality. Afflicted by what he referred to as the slows, he would refuse to launch attacks, insisting on more troops and additional time while the opposition strengthened their defenses. Lincoln wittily remarked, "If General McClellan has no desire to utilize the army, I would like to borrow it for a period." He was an exceptional administrator but lacked the heart of a warrior. 39. Robert Moses is very often regarded as the master architect of contemporary New York City. His vision molded the cityscape with extensive highways, bridges, and parks. However, beneath the concrete and steel was a deeply ingrained bias shown through an act of shockingly passive-aggressive and foolish design. When Moses constructed the parkways leading to the stunning public beaches on Long Island, he intentionally built the stone overpasses at a notably low height. Why? To obstruct city buses from passing beneath them. During the mid-20th century, the principal users of public buses were lower-income families and African Americans. Moses cleverly manipulated infrastructure as a means of segregation, ensuring that those lacking automobiles could not reach the public parks and beaches he was creating. It represented a lasting concrete testament to his own prejudiced folly. 40. In the year 1982, a truck driver by the name of Larry Walters resolved he could no longer endure his unremarkable existence. He yearned to see life from a fresh viewpoint. Rather than booking a flight, he ventured to an Army-Navy surplus shop, purchased 45 weather balloons, filled them with helium, and secured them to his beloved lawn chair. Equipped with a few sandwiches, a 6-pack of beer, and a pellet gun to pop the balloons when he wished to descend, Larry took off from his backyard in San Pedro, California. His intention was to gently rise a few hundred feet into the air. Instead, he soared to an elevation of 16,000 feet right into the primary flight path for Los Angeles International Airport. He floated for hours, astonishing commercial pilots, before ultimately popping some balloons and getting ensnared in power lines, resulting in a blackout for the neighborhood. 41. John Delorean was an exceptional automotive engineer, the mastermind behind the Pontiac GTO and the legendary stainless steel gull-winged vehicle that carried his name. However, his business skills were a complete debacle. He set up his factory in Northern Ireland, supported by substantial government subsidies. Yet the company began losing money right from the start. Desperate to salvage his faltering dream, Delorean took a disastrous turn from car manufacturing to international drug smuggling. In the year 1982, he was captured on video by the FBI during a sting operation. Agreeing to finance a large cocaine transaction he believed would secure him millions to rescue his company. He was infamously filmed celebrating the deal with a suitcase filled with cocaine. Although he was later acquitted due to a technicality of entrapment, the scandal irrevocably tarnished his reputation and ultimately doomed the Delorean Motor Company. 42. Robert McNamara epitomized the model of a brilliant technocrat. As Secretary of Defense during the Vietnam War, he was an expert with figures, graphs, and statistical data. 42. Robert McNamara epitomized the model of a brilliant technocrat. As Secretary of Defense during the Vietnam War, he was an expert with figures, graphs, and statistical data. He viewed the war not as a multifaceted human struggle, but rather as a management challenge that could be addressed through data analysis. He promoted the use of body counts as the key indicator of success. Convinced that if the United States eliminated more enemy combatants than they lost, it indicated they were prevailing. This detached analytical mindset resulted in a significant escalation of the conflict, propelled by inaccurate information and a deep misunderstanding of the perseverance of the Vietnamese people. Years later in his memoirs, McNamara ultimately recognized his chilling blunder, acknowledging that the war was fundamentally misguided and that his logic-driven strategy was a monumental failure, resulting in millions of casualties. 33. Uri Geller emerged as a worldwide sensation during the 1970s. The captivating Israeli illusionist persuaded millions, including various scientists, that he possessed authentic psychic abilities. His hallmark act involved bending spoons and keys, seemingly using only his mind. He became a household name, regularly featured on talk shows globally. However, his career of bending reality came to an abrupt end on The Tonight Show in 1973. Host Johnny Carson, who had a background in magic and was a skeptic, was guided by the renowned debunker James Randi. Rather than allowing Geller to utilize his own items, Carson's team selected various spoons and other objects, all meticulously monitored to prevent any possible deception. For 22 excruciating minutes of live television, Geller sat in silence, unable to bend anything. He attributed his failure to the studio lights and the skeptical atmosphere. Yet the audience witnessed the reality. Without his illusions, the enchantment vanished. And that concludes our compilation of 33 historical facepalms. However, assembling this list necessitated some difficult exclusions. Let's be real. The talent pool for this topic is astonishingly extensive. This is where you come into play. We are aware there exists a narrative of American foolishness out there. Something so comically absurd that it's a travesty we overlooked it. Who could it be? Head to the comments and share with us the most outrageous fool we neglected to mention. If you relished critiquing these historical blunders, obliterate that dislike button and give a solid hit on the like button, share with all, and remember to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you don't miss the upcoming episode. We appreciate your viewership and look forward to seeing you in the next one.